what we've got to do before we jump into a question. So if you do these things, it's like jumping into a swimming pool from a diving board. But if you don't do these things, it's like jumping into a swimming pool with no water in it. You'll just go splat when you start writing your essay. So what have you got to do to avoid going splat? First of all, you've got to think. Okay, and this sounds like an obvious thing and probably wondering why I'm making a point of saying it. However, if you just approach this question understanding it as you did at your first glance, then you might not come up with as fruitful and nuanced an answer as you possibly could. So somebody from a Protestant background might read this question, does God reward those who believe in him? And say, well, absolutely, yes, of course he does, because by faith alone are we justified. Faith is the reason why God rewards us with heaven. However, if you're coming at it from an atheist point of view, then you might say, well, what a ridiculous question. There's no such thing as God. I'm just going to argue that no, he doesn't reward anyone because he does not exist. However, with both of those responses, you can absolutely hold that as your starting point, but it would be quite a two-dimensional essay if you didn't start considering things other than those arguments. You can come up with clever, witty responses within those frameworks if you think about it before you go in. Oh, my head is actually covering this bit, but it's define. This whole video is going to be about defining, so we're going to see why this is important. But how you answer an essay, especially like this one, is going to be shaped by how you define the key terms. And if you don't make it clear how you're defining them, then it's not going to be clear to the examiner, or it will only become clear later in your essay once they've started reading it. So it won't be obvious to them. So you've really got to define what you mean. For example, when you say God, do you mean some sort of unmoved mover, some disinterested force, such as in the Aristotelian point of view? Or the deist point of view? Or do you mean the God of Christianity? Or do you mean a God in a different religious context? These are important things to define. Problematize. Well, you've really got to understand what the problems are with answering this question. And when you show that you know what the problems are, then you show that you're a clever student who knows what he's talking about and is going to overcome those problems when they answer the question. So what are the problems here? Well, how can we know what God does at all? We certainly can't really prove God's existence in the same way that you could prove that I exist, or that you could prove that you exist by yourself. So that's a problem that you've got to tackle when you're answering this question, or at least acknowledge when you're answering this question, especially if you want to say that God does reward people who believe in him. And then finally, you've got to outline. When you're writing an essay, you really want to be clear in what you're doing, both for yourself and for the examiner, so that the examiner can follow your argument very easily. You've got to remember that yours is not the only exam paper that the examiner is going to be reading. They're going to be reading hundreds, maybe thousands. And so you just want to make sure that your argument is very well structured and clear for them to follow. So write a plan for yourself, know what you're going to say, and know how you're going to argue it.